Bring a Trailer podcast.
Welcome to the BAT podcast. This is Randy Nonnenberg, co-founder of Bring a Trailer. I'm excited to be here, and we have a super special guest today, Anthony Serra from 1600veloce, who is very well known on the website. Anthony, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Randy. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're in New York. I'm out here in California, and I think people would be very excited to hear from you. You're kind of all over the website with a volume of cars these days, but it didn't really start that way. So I think people would love to hear sort of the origin story of what is now 1600veloce and sort of the beginnings on BAT for you.
Well, the beginnings on BAT for me was I was just a casual follower, read it every day, studied it. And about 2017, we decided to list our first car. And it was kind of just like, let me throw one up there and see what it does. It was interesting. I listed actually a Ferrari 308 GT4. It was a longtime client. He had the car for a long time. Actually, I built the engine many years before for him. And he was falling ill, and he didn't want to pass the car on to somebody new. And I said, well, there's a site called Bring a Trailer. Like, let's put the car up and see what we can do. And, we sold the car. And from there, it just slowly been building one listing at a time.
Yeah, talking about that early days, but you're already talking, you had a book of clients and you were selling cars in other ways, and you were in the car business for a good long time before even you discovered BAT. I looked at your account. I think you joined in 2014 and, like you said, hung around until you sold in 2017. But tell us about your business and your world back then, and even before that. You were in the car business for a good long time. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been in the car business my whole life. Grew up in a family shop, around mainly European cars, and cut my teeth, working with some very good old school mechanics, and learned my craft in the trade, which was fixing cars. That's how I started. I didn't start selling cars probably until about the mid 90s. And I had a series of small car lots, and then I got into the car wholesale business. That was my main business from 2007 to 2020. And I had, a small repair shop, and I had a lot of great clients. I had cars, but like the fancy cars and the special cars, like old Alphas and Porsches and BMWs, were just cars I kept to myself. And I didn't really sell those cars, unless they were like friends of mine. So, at some point we were looking at trying to get involved in selling specialty cars, but there really wasn't a great way to do it because, I'm a super passionate person. It's all cars for me. It's cars, cars, cars. And I always felt like when I was dealing with clients or trying to sell a car, through like the normal channels, whether it be eBay or, Auto Trader, those types of platforms, I just didn't get the right client that was like passionate about the car I was selling. Everything was like price or what can you do, or I just was like frustrated. I really wanted to be involved in something that I felt I could show all my background, which my background, like, going back to like, growing up in a family business, being around all these cool cars, which are basically on the site now, anything from, early, Fiats, Alphas, Ferraris, Porsches to, the mid 90s BMWs. I was around all those cars, when they were new. My family was involved in the gray market era, bringing in cars from Europe in the 80s, So, all these cars you and I always talk about, like, the 16 valve 190s, cars you couldn't get here. They were coming in like in the early 80s. I was seeing like all these cool cars, and they weren't even available here. And, back then it was like, everybody was bringing in gray market cars and trying to save money, the exchange rate. And then those cars kind of became taboo. Like, oh, you don't want a Euro car like that. That's not a great car. Like, you want a US car. It's like, well, do you really want a US car? Certain cars, obviously like Ferraris, there were people like, oh, now you have to have the US version, which, was heavier and side markers and all these things that the Euro cars just didn't have. That was kind of like the Wild West, I think, in the, the mid 80s. Like everybody was like in the importation business, bringing in these cars and Some were getting legalized. Some were kind of like halfway done. None of them passed like emissions. It's kind of like a joke. Like when I see like a California, 80s Ferrari, it's like that had all this like, basically, cats and all these additions. Like those cars never really passed smog checks. It's kind of like, it's
And
pretty
these
loose.
cars were all coming through your family. This was a family run
Yeah.
business and repair shop. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, that's where my love of cars started. That was, I was in my early teens, from
Mhm.
8 to 13 years old, like touching all these cars and dreaming about driving them someday and owning them, all these different cars. So, my passion really started from there. I had started my repair shop, which I also had a machine shop. I built, all my own engines for my race cars, gearboxes, did some good chunk of club racing, and then got into some professional racing and retired in 2008 from that to follow some things with family and sports, and how those things happen, right? You go
Yeah,
where you go.
absolutely. Well, you're what we've learned about you, and I think people know on the website is that you're like a methodical guy, and you're a thoughtful guy, and your staff is you've kind of spread that out across your staff because to do it at the scale that you're now selling cars, people ask us all the time. I tell you this anecdote all the time that people always say like, "How does 1600 Veloce do it?" Right? 1600 Veloce for those listening that don't know, like you're the highest volume of anybody on BAT, right? Which is saying something because there's a lot of high performers on BAT. So the racing, this sort of DNA that you have, the racing component where you need to be kind of put together and methodical about how you do things and how you prep cars, and then I presume the wholesale car business at scale. You need to have systems for doing this stuff, right? It can't be a onesie twosie sort of business, or you'll never make it. And now, how you've built experimenting with one car on BAT to many cars a week, and now over 1,000 cars that have gone through the system. That's sort of how you operate, or that's how I see you from the side, and that's the answer that I give people is that you need to have a system. Would you agree that that's kind of one of the things that lets you achieve this sort of success on BAT and frankly in those other pursuits as well?
Yes, the system was important, to put in place. We used to do a pretty high volume of cars, that we'd send to wholesale auctions. So, we had a system trucking in, trucking out, prepping the cars, getting them ready. So as we grew a little bit with Bring a Trailer, I would talk in the early days, especially with like Zach, like, hey, how would you feel about me running 10 cars a month? That was like, sure, if you want to give us 10 cars a month. And, we started slowly shifting as we could see. Obviously, we were selling the cars. My goal was it didn't really matter what the price was. You and I always talk about this. Like we're not stuck on numbers. There's a number between the buyer and the seller, and we decide that at that moment when the auction's going off. And it worked really well. Like everything that all my experiences through the car business, I was able to apply a little piece of each one of those items. Whether it's changing center caps on the wheels of a car, right? All small little things like that people, plex about when you go look at a car, right? Oh, it's got a scratched wheel, or oh, man, I wish it didn't have a scuffed wheel. Well, we do a lot of those things. We every car we try to make it stand as tall as possible. And not that we're making a car out of nothing. It's just that all those little details they matter to us, and my team emulates all of that. You have to be excellent to work in our organization, basically. Not because we're trying to, be elevated to that every day it has to be perfect. It's just I want everybody to do the best they can to their ability and carry that through in and out of the door, like leaving for work, like, whatever you do on the weekends, be good at it. Most of my guys that work on my team are either at car shows on the weekend, drifting, tracking, everybody's, we're into cars, we're into machines. So it's nice. Bring a Trailer has definitely given us, I would say, the perfect platform to show what we can do.
It's good that you talk about your team. How large is your team? I know people see the cars coming through, and some of these sellers are mysterious, right? And you're like, is this a one man show, or is this like, does it take an army of people to do this? I think you have a refined and lean team, but it still takes a good number of folks to put this together. What's your team look like these days?
Right now we're 23.
That feels substantial to me to be running cars through BAT and having 23 people doing it, but there's a lot of
Yeah,
work to be done. Is that right?
it's a lot of work. And, so when I got into selling the cars, I was really concerned about how they drive, how they look, what type of car they are. Then, the first, I would say, 300 or so listings, they were pretty simple. Like, we did lots of photos. And I think at first I got a little resistance from you guys. Like, I'd load a car and it had like 400 photos. Like, we don't need all that. Like, well, I think we do. I think we do need, 60 undercarriage pictures because, somebody's buying the car basically virtually, right? So nobody wants surprises. I mean, we try our best to show everything, through, walk around videos, series of, different photography. So when, we started, we were just doing it like with, simple point and shoot cameras, actually cell phones to start. Probably the first, 100 cars were just done with, simple cell phone, but, stuff's formatted correctly. And the key element that I added over the years is the media part. And that's really been, it's excellent. It's like a whole new journey for me. And I hired some really great guys. I mean, they're the best as far as I'm concerned. I mean, they're so creative, and we've actually been holding a lot of our content. We're slowly releasing it now. Like, we don't really have a big social media footprint, and it's for a reason. We're just not the type to broadcast. We let our work, show through the cars that we sell, and that's just how I am. So that's been hard. It's like trying to even doing this podcast today. It's just not my style. Like, I'm kind of keep to myself. And
Well, we appreciate that you're extending yourself a little bit and giving people a little bit of a glimpse behind the curtain. Yeah, I'm not a huge broadcaster myself either, but we've thought these stories are kind of like too good not to share on some level. We've done some fun podcast guests, and you've certainly been on the list as the number one seller, but also I think just a seller that does it a little bit differently than others. Your remarks about the number and what it takes to make it happen. You've always been, in my opinion, sort of long term, long game focused, right? Like this immediate car in front of you is not the make or break. It's kind of what this car can lead to. And I think that's been something that people can see on the site and something that's a reason for your success. I want to dive into there's when people think of 1600 Veloce, I think there's a few things they think of, also a few car models they probably think of. I don't know how you go so deep on 80s Porsche Speedsters. We got to talk about those. You had a few of those selling, which are super interesting. There's one live right now and one that just sold really well. And BB Ferraris. I don't know, like I don't know if there's anybody who's touched or sold more of those. Certainly not on BAT, but I don't know. I don't know where off of BAT either. How are there these certain models that kind of fall into your sweet spot? It seems like as soon as you have one done, you have another one in the pipeline right behind it.
yeah, I'm a big Ferrari BB guy. My father bought a brand new one in 1981, and the first time I saw that car and I got a ride in it in the Autostrada in Italy, I was in love with that car forever. It's going to be my forever car.
What
And
color was your dad's?
red, red
Red,
on
black,
black.
the two tone. Yeah, yeah. Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
cool.
typical boxer trim. And I've always been, I would say, secretly, people don't know me as a certain car guy, right? So I kind of took the BB world a little bit by storm on Bring a Trail, anyways. I see other other guys selling them, and they're super special cars. Cars for me, the value dollar is not what it is. I think BBs are such a screaming deal. You're talking about, like, it's one of the last cars to be truly hand built, right? We spent some time last year, right? We were in Italy together. We did a little tour. We had a lot of Ferrari content, right? For
Yeah,
that.
we did. Oh man, that trip was super incredible. Yeah, for those listening, we got to visit the Ferrari factory, and Anthony is a huge Ferrari guy, and opened doors for me that I never could have opened myself. And we got to see some really neat stuff, but all pretty much, other than the museum, maybe mostly modern stuff, right? So
Yeah,
pretty different than the stuff we're talking about. But you have some of that stuff in your inventory too. But yeah, Ferrari's something that resonates with you, isn't it?
it does. Yeah, they're special cars. I mean, we talked about this a lot. It's like, talk about brand recognition, right? You can go anywhere in the world, and somebody knows what a Ferrari is or the logo. it's always going to be like that. It's just it's an incredible brand. But back in the late '70s or early '80s, to own a BB was a big deal. They didn't make a lot of them. It's not like today where the cars are not mass produced, but they're more available. You're talking about cars that small batch. Early BBs. They're under 200, and then they go to 1,000. There's just not a lot of cars. So to see one in the flesh was it was an experience. Now we have like all these cars and coffees. You can pretty much bounce into any car you want on a weekend, depending where you are. So when put the first BB, which I think was I'll look at this real quick because
Yeah, look it up. Look it up. But I mean, you've sold those green ones, those sort of lime green ones. You've sold red ones. You've sold silver ones. It's crazy. I just associate that model with you. It's cool to hear your story about your dad having one of those. It kind of makes sense to me because there's some. I mean, you sell a lot of everything, but those I associate that model with you.
so yeah, no. So if we look, there was basically 12 BBs listed before I listed my first one, and it was a '77, beautiful color. It was called Celeste. It's like a light silver green color,
You
very
know,
rare. Might possibly be the only one in that color, and it was owned by a very good client and friend. And the person I sold the car to, we keep in constant contact. Just emails.
it's still in the U.S. Where is the car?
It's in the U.S. Yep. I think it resides in Iowa. If I'm
Iowa.
not
Okay.
mistaken. I think I remember sending you the video of the client when he got the car. He's such a nice guy. I mean, he was literally crying on his phone, walking around the car in his garage. And he's like, I cannot believe this car is in my garage. And that felt really good because there were a lot of people on that BB, a lot of people bidding on it. It was 39,500 views on that car, back in July of 23. So, it felt good, because I think up until that time, I really wasn't selling these types of cars on Bring a Trailer. I was selling them privately. And it was like another layer of us throwing our hat in the ring and trying something different and shifting. And, from there, we've sold a few others. I think we've sold a few 365s, a few carbureted, a few injected. I have two on that we're going to be offering soon.
Two more coming. All right.
Yeah, two
I
more.
love to hear that.
Yeah, one is a rare color combo, and the other one, a very good client of mine. It's kind of super perfect. I think it's probably one of the best ones I've ever seen, restored by a BB specialist. And I'm interested to see what the car does when we bring it up. It's a
So
great car.
you're Italian by name and by heritage, I know, and your dad has ties to driving Ferraris, which is very cool. But you're not just an Italian car guy, right? Like you're into the racing. You did was in other types of cars, and now there's these Porsche Speedsters that you're listing, and all sorts of other exotic type crazy stuff. Tell us about that model and why that model resonates. You mentioned the other day to me that that model is kind of having a moment. You think?
It really is. Yeah, the '89 Speedster is kind of it's an interesting Porsche. It's kind of like the best of the best in my opinion. Like the cabriolets are always a little bit of like I tell clients, if you want to value play 911, like a cabriolet is a great way to get in, right? Like used to be like cabriolets, Targas, then all of a sudden people are looking at Targas and they slowly been creeping up over the years because they're great. Like if you want something sort of like a convertible but still a coupe, the Targa is great. I think the Speedster is just special because that short windshield, wide body, non-turbo. It's just pure driving, right? And they've been sitting a little. I would say they've been good deals for the last couple of years. And we listed one. I think it was about a month ago. It was blue, Uncle Blau, beautiful car, low mileage. We knew that car was going to do pretty well, but we didn't know. I think Rob from Wob had sold one like a week before, and we were looking at the numbers, and it was like his was a guards red car. And it was like a little, it was a little low. It was like a low number, and I traded a text with him, and I was like, oh, I got a beautiful blue one coming. We'll see what happens, and the car did a much larger result, right? So I was like, okay, well, it's a blue car, it's a market outlier, but a lot of interest in the car, lots of emails, lots of contact on the car. Then we put up a white one, and it pretty much did almost the same money. So there seems to be a lot of eyes. There was another one that sold last week. These cars are all like 300. It's a big step if you look from last year to now. I think a lot of people are looking at that car as a long term investment. It's kind of like peak Porsche. If you look at them, they're actually doing better than turbos value wise, and they weren't great sellers new.
They were not. I have my Speedster story. I don't have a 512 BB story, but my Speedster story, I used to ride my bicycle to school, and I went through two neighborhoods and then a big park. And one of the last houses before the big park on the left, a guy had a two-car garage, and one of the bays had a black wide-body Speedster nosed into it, and he never drove it. But the garage door was open in the morning. It was never open when I biked home in the afternoon. It was open in the morning. And I'd bike by, and the back of that car obviously is so like crazy. The proportions on the wide, the top's low and it's got the clamshell over the back, and it was super shiny, detailed black. And I would always look in that guy's garage and just be totally blown away. Like, he never drives it. Who is this guy? He was a little mysterious, but I always will remember. And I still go to my parents' house and I like peer at that house, like wishing they'd open the garage. That car's long gone and that man's long gone. But that was the house that had the Speedster in it, which was just kind of always crazy to think about as I was going up and down the old neighborhood, which was not a super fancy neighborhood. That was a very fancy outlier car for our neighborhood. But these cars that you have, are they all coming from your general area? I mean, you have this pipeline of cars, and I've seen the facility you have, and there's, you talk about the next two Ferraris coming, but those are two of many, many cars that are on their way. Like, are these all within a 20-mile radius of you there? And how can that be if that's true? And if it's not, where do they come from?
Well, we've had a few. I actually have, I shouldn't say how many I have, right? That's probably not a good idea, but I have a few. We actually, we had a client that reached out and it has one in Hawaii. I think it's coming to us soon, a single ownership car.
That's another Speedster. I also mean in general, though, just like all the cars in your guys' pipeline and where they're coming from is, I
Oh,
mean,
well,
Hawaii is crazy. And then you've told me you guys have a car that just showed up from a European seller that wanted to ship it to the States and then sell it. I mean, that sort
yeah.
of reach is sort of mind boggling on some level.
Yeah, we had a car that came in last night from Germany. Somebody sent for us to sell, and we picked it up at the port, and it's going to go through our process, and we'll have the car for sale soon. I mean, we have cars come from all over the West Coast, Midwest, Florida. The BAT community is large. I think people underestimate how big it is. It's worldwide.
For sure. We obviously have you as a local partner, and people see that on the website, and we have those all over the place. But our intent for that originally was this will really help you out in your own backyard. But obviously, if people are sending you cars from Wichita, you can't control where the buyers are, but usually the sellers are going to be somewhat, or our concept was maybe that they would be somewhat in the area of these local partners. But it sounds like it's more about the visibility and people find you, and then no matter where they are, it's the upside of a great presentation is worth the shipping of a car at, a couple thousand miles, it sounds like.
Yes, that's true, Randy. I mean, we have people that reach out that just want us to sell their car. They just want to see the send off being done correctly. And that's a powerful thing. There's a lot of guys in our space here, great sellers. There's no competition on Bring a Trailer as far as I'm concerned. We're all friends. I mean, I send cars to other sellers too. If I feel like, that I can do better by referring that person to another local partner or even somebody that maybe is not a partner. Hey, I got this car. I think this is the guy you want to send your car to. He can help you out or help you, sell the car or do photography for you. And so that's what's great about the partnership group. We're here to help the community.
Yeah, you mentioned community, which is another, obviously, we talk about that on the BAT podcast all the time and in our office. And I talk about it with you. And we were traveling together and you were looking at comments on different cars that were happening. Tell me sort of your philosophy on that, and yeah, what it's like to have many, many transactions and obviously a lot of your business and your team sort of interfacing with the BAT community. How does that work for you?
Well, one key ingredient for us is that every comment comes from me. I post every comment on every car, every auction.
Man, you don't have any other staffer that can be helping you do that stuff? It's just gotta be you, huh?
It's important. So I have a client I'm doing a lot of work with. He's got a big collection of cars, and he gave a car to another. They're not competing site, just another site, right? He has a big collection of cars, so can you give us a car to sell? Right? He goes, okay, fine. And the car didn't sell. It sold. It actually sold twice on this other site, and they never converted the car. And so, he reaches out to me. He goes, "Listen, I feel embarrassed. Like, I gave this car to this other site to sell." I said, "Well, that's fine. I mean, I'm not upset. Like, you're my client. I respect whatever you want to do." And he goes, "I'm just really mad because they really handled the auction terribly." Well, I said, "Well, here's the big problem." I said, "You're trying to sell a car with somebody that's selling it remotely. They've never touched the car. They've never driven it. They know nothing about the car. They're just in the dark. They can't answer the questions. They can't go look at the car and say, obviously, I have a lot of people on my team, they help me answer the questions like, hey, there's somebody asked about a scratch. I get an email, then I go look at the car and okay, yep, that's there, then it's noted in one of the pictures in the listing. But for me, I think it's really important that I drive each car and I touch each car. It is. It's important to me. It may not be important to other people, but I got to drive each car that I'm selling.
You do all the comments yourself, but then what is sort of your philosophy on that? You and I have talked a lot about the ups and downs and the way that that needs to be handled, particularly as a business owner, and you're the face of the business, and how do you handle critique and how does that work? It's not for every dealer, right? Like not every we've seen plenty of dealers not succeed on BAT because interaction with the broader community or even potential buyers can be tricky or fraught for them. But you've done, I think, your reputation and your way that you interact with folks is additive and has been really great. So how does it play out like that? I think people ask that question a lot as well.
Well, the community is important. People posting in the listings, whether they're my cars or, anybody's, everybody adds value. Even if it's a negative comment, they're adding some type of value. Maybe it's just drama in the auction. And I think for the most part, the community polices itself. That's what I find, anyways. I come from a place of depth of knowledge. I don't use Google to look up all my stuff. Obviously, I don't know everything. I'm always willing to learn. So somebody can jump in an auction and point something out in a car, and it's like, hey, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. There's this thing, or maybe there's something on some paperwork. Oh, can you revert back to that? I saw the car had X, Y, and Z done, right? I think it's important. I think that's what makes the buyer, you know, I always tell people, like, if you know nothing about cars and you want to get into buying some type of special car, whether it's a classic, a modern classic, is you can pretty much jump into a bring a trail auction with an hour to go and just start at the bottom, read all the comments, and you can make a pretty good educated guess that what kind of car you're getting. And that's very unique. Your vision and your whole team and the community built all this, right? It's not just one single person's idea. It's constantly evolving every day.
And with input from people like yourself and other, I mean, even, yeah, input from those commenters and those buyers and, yeah, the local partner community and obviously all of us. Yeah, just trying to steer it towards that. So, no, we love that kind of we use you as an example, Anthony. You know this part that we do get a lot of questions point blank on your operation and our arrangement with you and how it has worked so well. And we've both been kind of in our own orbits, but it has meshed really well together. The type of business you've been running and the type of thing we've been trying to build. So it's fun to see that. What other models would you say are things that are kind of in your guys' wheelhouse or your sort of specialties that rise to the top? It's crazy. You almost would accept a wider variety than most sellers, I think. But those two that I called out of the Ferrari and the Porsche. But what else are sort of things that you've have particular expertise in or have sold in more volumes? Are there any others?
Well, we've sold a tremendous amount of long roof cars early on. And when we first started out, I would sprinkle in all these kind of crazy cars. Zach would look at it, really, what are we doing with this Mercedes E350 wagon? Right in the early days, I'm like, well, people need a dog car, right? They need something. All their
Not
kids
a car
around.
that's a dog. You mean like an actual dog, haul your dog around car,
Yeah,
right?
a dog car.
Yeah.
You gotta have something cool to drive. And I got a little resistance at the start, and then we started selling a few. And I remember Zach turned down a the last year Saab wagon, all wheel drive, manual, one owner car. It's like,
What are
no,
we
that's
turning
not
it
gonna.
down for? What are we turning that down
He's
for?
like,
That
it's
sounds
not a good.
great.
Yeah, it's not a good fit for the site. I'm like, wow.
Oh.
I'm like, wow. I'm like, okay. Like I sold it like in 5 minutes. I think I put it up on one of the wholesale trading sites. I think a Saab dealer or some ex Saab dealer bought it like in 3 minutes.
Oh, we should have sold that one.
Right, like in the manual Volvo wagons, all those cool cars. But those cars kind of dried up. They're kind of hard to find. COVID changed a lot of things. But with the car business in general, we used to find a lot of those cars. They're just they've phased out. There're just not a lot of them out there, and I kind of miss them. People call me all the time. Well, you sell Superbirds now, and you know, Carrera GTs and all these crazy cars. Like, what happened to all the other cars? I'm like, honestly, most of the cars flunk the shop. We have a process, right? Each car that comes in, it goes through our service shop first, and we have like a no go gauge. I can't tell you how many Caymans and Boxsters flunk our shop. Yeah, it just we can't sell them.
Is that because of the cars or their owners or their checkered history or what's the problem?
Yeah, it's usually lack of service, or run a DME report on the car and it's like really bad.
Yeah.
There's just like all these different things, crashed cars, and we just don't, we're not really getting involved in stuff like. So it's hard to find the perfect rotation of cars. So we're kind of all over the map. I mean, we're selling some early. I got a bunch of like mid 70s like dirt bikes coming up, all really cool, like restored. So I don't say no to anything, as long as as long as I feel comfortable with the car, that it's cool. It's got to meet a criteria. It doesn't have to be the best one, but if it has a great service history, that means a lot. I'll take a nice patinaed car that's got a huge stack of service records from new. I mean, who wouldn't, right? That's like the ultimate car. They have a big 3 ring binder of records and know everything about the car. Those are great cars. The market's changing too. I think we talked about that a little bit last night. We're talking about the really expensive supercars and like, where are those cars, right? What's going on with them? A lot of people are holding them. You don't even see them at some of the big in-person auctions. Everybody's fighting to find these cars. Just not enough of them to go around.
And some of those I saw when I visited your facility. I think we should tell people a little bit about the area you're in. That you guys are doing some events. Your facility that you have there is super cool. Sort of little showroom clubhouse area that you've got, and it's also just I don't think it happens. It's not a coincidence. It's in an area that you tell me is very vibrant for weekend car activities and cars and coffees, and it's sort of a bright spot for automotive activity just north of New York City. There, what can you share about why that is and why you guys are kind of a fit in that community?
Just happened that way. I mean, there's tons of cars in our local area. A lot of big collectors, guys that have one car. Just lots of car enthusiasts. There's a meetup somewhere on any given Saturday or Sunday. There's 10, 15 guys getting together. It could be a couple hundred. We have cars and coffee at our event space in our offices. It's not publicly broadcasted, or we don't send it out in social media, but we'll have like 100 cars just show up. And then there's a coffee shop across the street from us. They'll have 100 cars. It's like mayhem all of a sudden.
That's crazy.
We're also a big sponsor of caffeine and carburetors, which can get anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 cars in 3 hours.
Tell people where that is for those that don't know.
It's in New Canaan, Connecticut.
In Connecticut.
It's been going on for many years. This year they only have 2 events. They used to have 4. I think the towns they're wearing down a little bit with having so many cars show up.
Well, we're going to give them an alternative. As you know, next weekend or the weekend after this airs, we're doing a alumni gathering in Arizona at one of our local partners there in Scottsdale at 911R, which is exciting. And then sort of the East Coast swing, we're going to set up one at 1600 Veloce, which we're super excited about. The date is
Yeah.
TBD on that, but we're going to be announcing it and inviting some people to come meet Anthony and see the area and see some of the fun cars that are there local. And it's a vibrant spot. I was super excited to visit, and I'm excited to get back. And you guys also do some of your own events, and it's just sort of a vibrant car culture there. And us bringing a BAT event to your spot is something we've been talking about for a long time.
Yeah, super excited. I mean, I think we're going to have a really good grouping of community members show up. It's like, I can't wait. I can't wait to see all the cars. I mean, we did the Glen last year, even with all that rain, people still showed up. You know, we had a really cool drive, right? We drove from my offices up to the Glen. You got to drive, bring a trailer number two.
Oh, we didn't even talk about that. Yeah, you have been the safe harbor for the second auction car of all time, lot number two. My former E30 M3, white with black interior, and it went through a couple different buyers, and then you ended up with it. And we've always had a fun dialogue about how you still have that car, and I got you let me drive it, which was very generous of you. Across a whole bunch of the state of New York to go to Watkins Glen to our alumni gathering, and those of you who were at the alumni gathering saw that car there with a couple of other 1600 Veloce cars. That was a super meaningful drive for me, Anthony. I've told you I appreciate it, but I'll tell you again, that was fantastic.
Yeah, it was fun. Remember, we were gassing up at the gas station, and there was that young kid, that 944,
Yep.
came out, was talking to us. He was at the event. I guess I don't, he was with maybe his mom. I'm not sure. And he followed us like almost the whole way back, right? Like three
Yep.
hours, three and a half
Yep.
hours. We're like in this train of cars. And it's like, that's what it's all about. You know, that's what Bring a Trailer is. It's a community. That's what drives it.
Yeah, those events really pull that out. I've been glad that you've been able to go to a couple of those events now, which has been fun. You and I met for the first time at one of our early BAT alumni gatherings, which was at Lime Rock Park. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. And then I think before that, you had that podcast, Classic Car Club Manhattan.
Oh, that's right. We did an event there. That's right. We did a podcast recording with the guys from The Drive. Man, that's early days, and we didn't know what the heck we were doing in New York City, but we liked those guys at Classic Car Club, and they said, "Hey, let's get some cars out." And we I think we got 30 or 40 cars into their building and a good crowd. And yeah, that's right. That's right. I had forgotten about that. I always
Yeah.
associate that Lime Rock Park time was really fun because you brought a bunch of cars. I think you brought the Mercedes wagon, and you maybe brought the Bullet. Your
Yep.
Mustang, did you bring? Yeah. Anyway, some cars that you still have, and some that have gone down the road. But meeting you there was meaningful for me in the early days of us figuring out how we're working together with clients and sellers. And you were kind of very similar to how you are now, level headed and had a good approach about it. And yeah, anyway, we both come a long way since then. That was quite a while ago, but it's been good to do it together.
That was 2018, right? And
Is that right?
it was before COVID. And I remember, like, the first couple of weeks of the lockdown, I think we were trading emails or calls. Like, what do we do? Like, I have all these cars, right? Like, I think we can, like, the world was coming to an end. I mean, you go back to some of those comments, like, go back to, like, what is that? Whatever. It's March 20th of, 2020, and people posting like, it's the end of the world. What are you doing? You're buying these, like, if we all had a time machine, we'd all be going back and buying all those cars.
We should have bought them. Yeah, and it's crazy. BAT was on for all those days. We didn't like pause the auctions or shut it off or anything. They were live, and more people were listing. I mean, submissions took a nosedive for like a 2 week period. Nobody submitted their car, and we were like in panic mode, like everybody else was. But then, obviously, I mean, looking back, it's crazy. But yeah, then it just rocketed forward as everybody as everybody figured it out. But yeah, you were there for that, and you rode through that. How did that affect your business?
It was actually the perfect storm. For me, we were like 3 years into a 5-year phase out plan of getting out of the part of the car business that really at the end just was just work. Working at different car wholesale auctions, and dealing with new car dealer trades, and the business was changing, and COVID really, when that happened, I just made the decision. I said, you know what? I sat down with everybody and I said, we're just going to sell specialty cars, and that's it. And we're going to commit to it, and we're going to build a whole business around it. And you guys gave us a lot of bandwidth to be able to do that, and it was good. It was the right timing. Even for you guys, to expand the site, and with your partnership. it really helped. Once Hearst came in, the whole site changed, right? We were able to do so many more things. Without that, I think without COVID, maybe it'd be so different, right?
Well, everything would be different for everybody. Everybody's trajectory in those years would have been different. But it's all just interesting to look back at what kind of things could thrive within that. And not everything could, but we were pretty fortunate where we ended up. We know that for sure and are thankful. Yeah, I'm trying to think of what else we need to tell the audience about 1600 Veloce. What other questions or thoughts they would have always wondered. I'm telling you, I think people just like hearing your voice and knowing who's behind the operation. Obviously, it's good that you shine the light on your team. It's not just
Yeah.
Anthony and his show, but a lot of it has been your vision, and it's I'll tell you, man, it's super impressive to watch and just see the success rate and the way that you prioritize getting the car sold instead of miss and reserve and trying to run it 3 times to, maximize another $1,000 out of the deal or whatever. It's a long range view that you have. And I'd love to just watch it evolve.
Well, the long range, for me, longevity is, and also, I have guys that have been with me. My lead do it all technician, my best friend basically too. I mean, we've been doing stuff together since for like over 30 years, like 32 years we've been working together. I have another tech that's been with me for 20. My brother runs the repair side of the shop. I mean, he's basically been running our operation since 2007. So, I have, my lead detailer has been with me for 11 years. You've met a lot of people on my staff. Obviously, most of the buyers on Bring a Trailer don't deal with me. They deal with, Diane's our director of auctions. We've been working together for like 14 years. So there's a lot of people that are important to me. And, even like going back, if we talk about COVID, like during the lockdown, my guys are like, what's going to happen? Are we going to lose our jobs? I mean, we dealt with all these different companies and we're just watching people getting furloughed and, let go and just like crazy. Right. And I just like, we took a yellow pad and said like how many cars we have, how much work we have in progress. And it's like, well, if phones don't ring, we could probably work for like 2 years. I said, all right, well, guys show up to work, unless they tell us we can't work, we're going to, so I'm kind of proud of that. It's a small company, but nobody had any disruption. We actually added people. We grew and did the best we could. But I think it's important. Like a lot of guys that are trying to sell cars and Bring a Trailer, other dealers, people that I know in the car business, and I tell them like, you got to have some good people to work with, to be successful. It's not just about selling a car. You have to. It's everything, right? And we're talking a little bit about it last night. Paperwork, right? All these like things, the art of the deal, and making sure that that customer is happy. And that's what we pride ourselves. Like you buy a car from us, and from the minute you win that car, and we did the deal, everything's electronically. We try to make it super easy. You can have your car in a couple days. Even if you're, we've sold cars to the West Coast. Somebody buys a car and they have the car 4 days later in their driveway with their paperwork, everything ready to go, and that's important. I think you guys are adding some new features, right, to help the buyers. Because it's kind of daunting, right? Bidding on a car and winning it. Even buying it from a private person or a dealer. It's like, how do I trust that person? Are they gonna? Is the car exist or is the paperwork exist? And so it's I think the community helps that, right? If you do it the right way, I'm really fortunate. All the guys that comment in our auctions. I mean, there's so many. I couldn't name them all. They're all great. They are so helpful in the process of that buyer connecting that car and making them feel like, oh God, whether you're cheering them on to bid it or congratulating after the auction, like where else do you see that? It doesn't exist. So even if you're a casual viewer and you're not buying a car, just to be part of the process is interesting. And that's what makes me want to get up every day. That connection, right? We did some traveling last year. We did that trip in Europe. We went to the Bologna Auto Show, right? And
Oh man, we haven't even gotten to that. We could do a
yeah,
whole podcast on just that, man.
oh
The
my God, yeah.
fascinating way that cars are sold in Italy is just, man, that's 2 or 3 hours in and of itself.
But I think we did like we were technically at 3 racetracks, right? We met at Tazio Nuvolari. We toured the factory. We were at Fiorano, and then I said, "Hey, you want to go to the to Mugello to the Finale Mondiale, right?" It's like we go up there, and it's like, who can we find that's a BAT guy? It's like boom, all of a sudden, like there's like four of us in the paddock talking, guys that have bought cars, right? Others, another seller. So when you think about it, it's really worldwide.
Yep.
People.
Yeah, we were in that paddock. There was a Canadian guy. There was, that young guy with the Ferrari. There was some guy that you had known from customizing a couple cars that had gone through BAT, I think, and through your collection. That was super fun. Yeah, seeing BAT's reach is invigorating like that. That's kind of the community moment, right? When you meet them in person and you realize you've all been looking at the same stuff for the last few years. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, no, I mean that was pretty cool, right? And I think our whole trip that we did, we just kind of winged it, right? We're just like, hey, let's go see what happens, and obviously it's just so cool to see. It's really cool is like when you're at a car show, or you like we were at the auto show, right? People are actually looking at like a BAT listing to kind of look at the valuation graph of the car, right? I find that I went to we were at Amelia a couple weeks ago, and you're sitting in an in-person auction, live bidding, and you look, you just do a quick span to the room and look at everybody's cell phone. They're looking at BAT while they're sitting at at an auction, right? They're looking at that graph like, oh, that car's
That's pretty different, man. It wasn't always that way, Things have evolved quite a bit, but no, I've certainly seen that phenomenon as well. Back in the olden days, they said they didn't know what BAT was. So it's come a long way. But yeah, talking about the different things we've experienced together, sort of in parallel, I think is one of the things that resonates about this podcast and just talking about it with you, but also spending time with you. It's been fun to see us both sort of grow as this phenomenon, and the community has grown with it. So, yeah, with that, we certainly want to shine a light on the fact that we'll be doing an event out in your neck of the woods. Any other news coming from the 1600 Veloce side, or things we ought to look out for? Or are we just going to try to get everybody to be on site at some point?
well, I'd like obviously love to see everybody show up to the event, but we're working on some new media formatting. We have a lot of new things we'll be rolling out in the next few months. We changed a lot of our media last year. We got to like our 1,000th listing last March, and then we kind of decided. I took on some new guys on my media team, and letting them really, really run wild with it. I think you guys picked up we sold a Superbird last week. You grabbed one of our videos and had it up on your Instagram, and the view count like went off the Richter scale on
Did
that
it? Yeah,
car,
that's
right?
awesome.
And so it's good. Like, going back to it's not just about selling cars. Like, we could do our simple auction probably would work for anybody, like a simple presentation. But I really feel like each car is special. You might need an extra video or some more photography. Some people kind of cut on me a little bit. Like I had a lot of photos and during my listings, and the cars are beautiful to me. They're like a living being, right? And so we're actually working on some stuff. Gregory that works with us here, we've been kind of like thinking about like how do we show the car to the potential buyer because they can't smell it, right?
Mhm.
So so it's like
You
we're
haven't
working
cracked
on
that one yet. How to smell the car through your
yeah.
computer? We haven't gone down that road yet.
We figured something out. I think that's going to work pretty well to emulate that. So
Okay,
yes,
cool. Well,
I'm
we
excited
look
about it.
forward to seeing it or smelling it.
Yeah, exactly. That's like the only thing you can't do, right?
There you go. Okay, cool. Well, you heard it from the horse's mouth, folks. Anthony, thank you so much for your time today. We're going to wrap it up here, but man, we could go real long on some other things, so we'll have to have you back on the podcast again for another one. This one has been super enlightening and interesting for folks. Again, want to thank you for what you're doing. Thank your team for what you're doing. And yeah, 1600 Veloce, you can go search that on BAT. You can search 1600veloce.com. He's got obviously his own presence and social as well. There are cool cars live right now on BAT from Anthony and his team, and there will be many, many more. I have a feeling here coming in the weeks ahead as spring ramps up. Anthony, thanks for joining us. It's been great.
Well, thanks, Randy.
We'll do it again. That's it for this BAT podcast, and we'll see you on the next one.